first of all, let me thank everyone for the great conversations we've had this week. Still enjoying the experience of getting back together after a couple of years of meeting with everyone on video. So happy to be here and really happy to be a sponsor of this event. So we're going to take a look at a little bit of a different view on a topic that's been covered in some detail in parts over the course of the last day and a half here with Wi-Fi and 5G convergence. I think every presentation has had some concept of convergence in it. When we talk about even the last panel and the implementation of open roaming in the retail concept, there's still that seamless concept, right? Moving from the parking lot, detecting users in the parking lot as they come into the building and delivering services to them with some level of continuity. And so when I look at, what's happening now with 5G, I'm really looking at it from a continuity of service and services offered to subscribers, kind of regardless of the radio access that they're using, right? And so have you ever had a presentation where you work on one slide? It's really way too much time spent on that slide, and you're just burning hours, but you can't get out of it. This is that slide for me, right? So just kind of looking at the concepts of convergence and quality in that context, going all the way back to nearly the year 2000, but looking at the first concepts of roaming. And again, this is my lens on it. There were plenty of things happening, that aren't reflected here. But in my time back at iPass, AT&T, IBM, and Intel had this big press release around Cometa and this opportunity to kind of start to bring together this federation of Wi-Fi hotspots. So the concept of roaming from one network to another, that was kind of the first commercial view of it. We kind of progressed along the way here. Roaming hubs came in to try to simplify the integration. BSGW, being one of the more prominent, EduRoam being one of the more visible roaming programs across the education community. And then you kind of see down the bottom here the progression of the 3G and cellular world, the technologies coming into play, and then key spots along the way. I'm going to try the laser, right? Convergence from a commercial package perspective. You had companies bringing together 3G, sometimes in the form of Wi-Fi hotspots, sometimes Wi-Fi roaming, just as an aggregation service. But the concept of convergence, was present, more than a decade ago, in terms of companies trying to bring these together. Kind of sneaky in here, Wi-Fi Passpoint, which has been around for more than 10 years. It's front and center now, and maybe over the last 5 years, but there was a 5-year period in there where the ecosystem was trying to get their arms around it, and exactly how do you do it, what drives adoption, who's going to really throw their weight behind it to make it go, and ask the network providers, the Wi-Fi network providers, to take the upgrade. AT&T did that in the States in 2017-18, where they basically said, we're done with connection managers, we're done with Whisper and clunky integrations and all this effort. We want a standard, we're going to adopt the standard, and we're going to ask our partners to really work towards that standard. And from a roaming perspective, that was where the fuel got put in the engine for for Passpoint, right? Around the same time, roaming, quality of Wi-Fi, AT&T also, kind of voicing an opinion here, which is, hey, we love this concept of bringing these networks into our connectivity portfolio, but I need to have a little bit better understanding of what exactly I'm putting my users on when I'm, offloading them to Wi-Fi networks. I don't own, operate, or manage those networks. I don't have a lot of understanding of what the experience is. I like the concept of getting connectivity where I can't provide it with the macro network, but I need to know more, right? Along the way here, then, the last 5 years, we have some really, significant technology innovations which have been focused on how do we bring this convergence together? How do we do these things and act in a more coordinated way? Open roaming, WBA was right at the front of that. Hey, we're gonna standardize this technology and put a program around it so that customers don't have to become experts. Anybody who has a Passpoint network doesn't have to become an expert in all of this technology. Let's put a program around it, and that's really helped pour gas on the roaming and convergence fire. 6E, 6 gigahertz spectrum, 5G here, Wi-Fi 7 coming, MLO multi-link operation, which we've covered in pretty good detail here the course of the day. But this is kind of this evolution, and I think it's important, right, to appreciate what's happening now in the context of roaming and convergence. And so when I was thinking about what has been the problem, right? Why hasn't it gone faster than we feel like it should have? And it's just been trust issues, right? In 3GPP land, everything's prescribed. The spectrum is licensed. It's very well laid out, very deterministic in terms of implementations, right? And so the reasons that mobile operators are skeptical are founded, right? They have very good control, very good visibility. They're in their own spectrum, so they had pretty high assurances that things were going to be good in their world. They look at the Wi-Fi world. Every network's different, implementations vary, infrastructure behind small cells vary, and so there's just a lot of things there that were probably justified in their kind of like I'll use it if I have to, but I'm still really heavily would prefer my own network, and can I trust my brand to that? There are billions of dollars into spectrum and deployments and all of this, and to give their users an experience that they can't understand is really not necessarily where they'd want to be. And so when they say these things, right, I'm gonna skip through some of the automations. They took too long. That spectrum thing was really one of the bigger things, and that's been true for a while. And some of the latest technology here we're going to see doesn't necessarily guarantee great spectrum, but it implements a lot of things that are going to to kind of give us the tools to get around it. A lot of knocks on the protocol. Hey, Wi-Fi is great, but it's just too inefficient. It gets loaded down, too many users, there's no control. We just don't have any ability to manage the performance of the protocol under different scenarios, different cases, right? And load. And then security, which is really kind of a red herring, right? We all know that if it's properly designed and implemented, that the security is there, but it's just become easier, right? And with the open roaming standardization, you can almost count on it, right? The security to be what it needs to be. No standards for networks. Roaming, mobile operators who wanted to roam and take advantage of Wi-Fi had to go through a pretty exhaustive exercise with every network operator. Even if they were using the right technology, there was still just nuances to every single implementation that was the juice worth the squeeze in doing this, and maybe not, right? Limited visibility, I think this is a fairly easy one, right? Even with open roaming today, there's still a lack of visibility into the access network quality. And so the connectivity is easy, the experience is seamless, and that's great. But once those users are connected, what is really the experience? And we're going to touch on that here in a minute, what we're doing in the WBA to really attack that problem. And then finally, that's great. I can offload my users to Wi-Fi, but a lot of the services I offer as a mobile operator are driven by access to my core. So if I can only offer a subset of my services to users when they're seamlessly connected to some other network that I sponsored, how do I explain that certain things aren't available to them, or certain protections or filtering or this sort of stuff, right? And so the lack of consistency in services has always been something that has come up in a true convergence world. So with all of those challenges, why bother? Like, really, shouldn't I just focus on building out my mobile network, my cellular network? And it's really in the numbers, right? If you were delivering wireless broadband in the world and you could pick only one technology to do it, if you had only one, it would be Wi-Fi. And the numbers bear it out, right? There's 2.5 times as many Wi-Fi devices in use as there are people on Earth. So Wi-Fi is the technology. When you look at developing countries, when you look at digital divide projects, they're starting with Wi-Fi because that's how you get to people and devices, right? The spectrum is in no small part a motivator to get to Wi-Fi or incorporate Wi-Fi. 6 gigahertz, certainly in North America, where you have the 1200 megahertz of superhighway, that maybe you're putting 320 megahertz channels there. Maybe you're just using it to put more lanes on the highway, right, instead of fatter lanes on the highway. But that spectrum is the bandwidth that we need to accommodate the kind of exploding growth of wireless data consumption, right? Something like 25 or 30% year-over-year growth in wireless data consumption. I'm probably getting that wrong, but it's a big number, right? The spectrum is important. Even the lower part of the 6 gigahertz spectrum is important. Any spectrum is important to accommodate demand. Wi-Fi is just by its maturity ahead of 5G buildouts, right? If you're looking at what you need to do to get 5G into the places where Wi-Fi already is, there's time involved, there's expense involved, the business case for it is maybe, maybe not. The opportunity to build your Wi-Fi, your 5G services, and then incorporate Wi-Fi into your service architecture allows you to deliver the 5G services in places where 5G hasn't yet been delivered, right? So there's a great motivation there for companies who want to promote 5G, right? Which pretty much every mobile operator is. The ability to introduce 5G services and say, I can do that with consistency, inside, outside, wherever you happen to be. Kind of tied to that is this idea that services are increasingly contextual. I want to offer services based on location, LBS. It's been a, that's a concept that's not new at all, but the need to get really precise. If you're in a retail situation and I want to zone in on a specific spot within a store, right, within a retail setting, the ability to draw that really precise location from the Wi-Fi infrastructure is there today. Right, that's an opportunity that you have today to really bring precision to location-based services, and then finally the economics of it. Right, it's been covered in a couple of different ways over the course of the last day and a half, but the ability to bring wireless connectivity with Wi-Fi just is a much more economically viable approach for customers, brands, retailers, whoever it happens to be. The cost, I think we talked just in the last panel here, it was, how much do I need to spend to bring cellular signal to the back of the store, right? And is it worth it? It's way more viable to bring Wi-Fi and achieve that connectivity with Wi-Fi, right? So kind of going back, kind of getting back to our idea on convergence, looking at the last, let's say 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and what we're doing as an ecosystem to address the gaps. What were those challenges and the skepticism that mobile operators have to really embracing Wi-Fi as a radio access technology for their services, right? Past point, we talked about starting with 5G, 3GPP release 15, the access and mobility functions, gives persistent context to devices. Again, coming back to that concept of location. And then here we go, right, with the performance and the resilience functions and features of both Wi-Fi and 5G to really start to create the environment, create the context, and give us the tools that we need to achieve true convergence, right? Standardization, a huge important piece of this. Even if all the tools existed, if you have to be a rocket scientist to put it together, it's a little bit of a drag on adoption, right? And open roaming has been fantastic in kind of making it easy for folks who are not PhDs in Wi-Fi to achieve this, right? And then finally, we're looking at achievement of deterministic behavior regardless of the radio access. That's what we really want. That's what mobile operators really want to embrace convergence and embrace Wi-Fi. Is I need to be able to trust that the behavior and the performance of the wireless services are up to standard and predictable and consistent when I utilize Wi-Fi to deliver the services. Okay. I apologize for the architecture chart. I promise not to go into it interface by interface, but it is interesting from a comparative standpoint, right? If you look back at kind of the 4G and let's just call it pre-5G world, Wi-Fi as a non-3GPP access and any non-3GPP access were just kind of bolt-ons to whatever the 3GPP architecture had. And there was really no accommodation or accounting for the things that were going to be the blockers. The unified data plane, the consistent context in signaling, and you just kind of see that, right? This is Wi-Fi down here bolted onto EPDG with a bunch of interfaces that were somewhat nondescript and separate. It was kind of I'm either on Wi-Fi or I'm on cellular, and that was the challenge, right? You come to the 5G world and you can see really the only thing I really want to point out here is the device has a context to the mobility function in 5G, both through a cellular access and through its Wi-Fi access simultaneously. Same in the data plane, right? Data's coming through here and coming to the user plane function. In Wi-Fi, it's coming through the interworking function to get to the user plane. And so this is really where convergence, this is what makes convergence possible from an architecture perspective. I'm anchoring my context, the 3GPP network, the mobile network knows about me, whether I'm in Wi-Fi or cellular. I need that to be able to know how to transition services and make good decisions about how services are getting delivered. And then in the user plane, we're doing some great things. A lot of them have been covered here today to bring consistency and continuity in the user plane function. You can see some of the specific interfaces up here. SIM-based authentication and open roaming, just to make the movement between them seamless, obviously prerequisite for this. ATSSS we've talked about in a couple of different sessions, but the ability to use both accesses simultaneously, switch between them, steer between them, split the traffic according to policy, right? This is a significant one, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that the Wi-Fi access is, the RF is going to be better or the 5G is going to be better. What it means is I have the option of using both, and I have the intelligence and capability to deliver the right experience regardless of the RAT. I'm going to take all of this that's available, all these resources that are available, and I'm going to use the best of them according to policy. In the Wi-Fi side, we've talked at length about multi-link operation. I won't go into the specific details of how it works. That's been covered pretty well. There are some practical implementations, and this is where, as an ecosystem, we need to spend a lot of energy on making sure that we're not taking battery life into the ground, right? As we use multiple interfaces simultaneously, we need to make sure that we're, not taking a step backwards on power management. We've done a pretty good job as an ecosystem of bringing that forward and letting a device go through the whole day with connectivity. I'm not sure users would make the trade of running out of battery at lunch just to have, converged access. You put those two things together and you really start to get the picture, right? I can use both 3GPP, non-3GPP access. I have the ability to split traffic, steer traffic. I have the ability to use multi-link operation to use the best available Wi-Fi across all the bands and channels. Right now, my options and opportunities to provide really predictable, really clean and reliable access are just much better, right? We talked at one point, I heard somebody mention it, hey, what if I don't actually want, this isn't carrier Wi-Fi? That is certainly a very popular implementation, but for a mobile operator to implement Wi-Fi as part of their strategy and anchor those sessions into the session management function really just starts to create this super seamless. You get Wi-Fi and 3GPP access as just radio access technologies feeding a service, supplying services. One thing we have some work to do on is just still understanding Wi-Fi RAN health, right? And this is where I'm, spending a lot of my time within the WBA. RF performance in Wi-Fi is half of all problems. In my life as an MSP, hospitality and MDU, knock lights are all green, users still complaining about service. What the heck? We need to understand the performance of the Wi-Fi RAN better. The ability to avoid problems and steer around them and move around them is great with ATSSS and Wi-Fi 7 multi-link operation, but it's not a substitute for understanding what's happening in RF and addressing it, right? So this is my shameless plug for Galgus here as a sponsor for the event. We see the data consumption driven by digital transformation, like everybody, just off the charts, right? We are squarely in a wireless world. That degraded RF impacts the brand when it's bad, and you don't know about it before the users usually. The need to be in front of it, to understand it, be analyzing RF constantly and making adjustments to the venue, not just an individual AP, but the entire venue to optimize the radio resources in a location is what's required to not only steer around with the other technologies, but address the RF environment really practically, right? Galgus's cognitive hotspot technology gives that self-healing Wi-Fi, right? Looking direct integration with radios, looking at the telemetry, understanding what's happening across all APs in a venue and saying, I have this pool of resources available in this location to make the access better. Let me make adjustments. And they coordinate that change in RF power, channel selection, these sorts of things in a way that's across the venue to keep that level of performance persistently high and get us more towards that deterministic behavior that we're after. So shared spectrum, kind of coming back to kind of our checklist of how we're doing as an industry, Wi-Fi 7 and 5G to give us the performance and resilience. Technical weaknesses with Wi-Fi 6, we get more towards the technologies that we want to see with OFDMA, and the kind of the proliferation of 802.1x for seamless authentication. Passpoint, open roaming, 3GPP, release 15 and greater give us the tools and the platform to do what we want to do for convergence. The work in the WBA here to give us the visibility into the RF performance and access network performance, using measurements we already have, but bringing attention to how we evaluate MCS and latency and other measurements to say, hey, this constitutes good quality or predictable quality for the user experience. And then the ability to anchor both Wi-Fi and 3GPP access into the session management function in 5G really gives us a true converged 5G Wi-Fi service. Okay. Thank you for the time. I don't know if we have time for questions.